This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven. And today I'm going to talk about something really dear to my heart, which is, you're going to think is a bizarre subject, but it's brown tulips. And I love them. I really love tulips, the colour of tea, black tea, or tea with milk, or a latte, and, a really milky coffee. And I don't know why, it's like I love green flowers, but I love brown flowers, and I kind of always have kind of coppery, bronzy. They're not autumnal to me. They're just really glamorous, and they look sort of slightly metallic, but just really rich and exotic and strange. And I absolutely love them. So I've got sort of two stories to tell, really, about brown tulips. And the first is that my parents grew a variety in their garden, which was called Brune, B-R-U-I-N-E, which may think means brown. Wimpel. And this was a beautiful tulip. So it was slightly kind of strange pinky brown on the inside. I mean, that sounds really odd. It was mainly brown, but it definitely had, that thing of copper being slightly burnished with a sort of goldeny pinky hue over the top. So it was that in the center, so in the petal interior. And in the exterior, it was that, but with a really distinctive wash of silver over the outside. Wow, what a glamorous thing it was, Brune Wimpel. Now, why do I say it was? Because what happened, we had quite a lot of it here, but then an organic bulb grower, this is total hearsay, but this is what I gather, bought all the stock of it because quite rightly he thought it was a very, very beautiful tulip, which, by the way, I think, total gossip here, so does King Charles. He was very keen on Brune Wimpel. I think it was his favourite tulip. It's a very classy item, I can tell you. Anyway, and what happened is he bought all the stock of it one year, and he was organic. And this is a whole thorny subject, actually, is the level of chemicals that have to be used in the tulip industry to keep them healthy. But of course, you can't if you're organic. And unfortunately, his stock got either a virus or a bacteria, or I think probably a fungus, maybe tulip blight or fusarium or something. And basically, once it was checked by the phytochemical kind of checking system, it was pretty much all infected and had to be destroyed. And that was the end of Brune Wimpel, or Brune Wimpel. I hope I've got that story in the outline pretty much accurate. Either way, it's no longer around. And we tried here, Josie and I, marking every bulb that we still had here, but it has gradually dwindled, which is such a shame. And I've checked in my parents' garden and I can't find it there either. And so some of you have it still in your garden, in which case treasure it. But it is pretty much disappeared, very, very sadly. So that's one brown tulip, which I mourn. Anyway, I then went to the most amazing place, which if you can go to Holland next March or April, I couldn't more passionately recommend. To be honest, to me, even more jewel-like and exciting than the Keukenhof Gardens, which are exceptional for so many varieties being on show at once. But the place I'm talking about is called Hortus Bulborum, and it's very near Keukenhof, but it's basically a bulb library. And I have talked about it in the past on the podcast, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit more here, which is like a seed library, with something that is a living item, like a bulb or a seed, you will every so often have to grow it out for it to remain patent, viable, I guess. And so what happens at Hortus bulborum is that they are funded by, I think, private people, but also by the government a bit, to grow out a proportion of their collection every year. But only a small proportion. And I don't know what proportion exactly, but maybe 5 or 10% they can grow out every year. And you need to do that every so often to keep them viable. And I've been several times to this place in spring, but one year that I went, maybe 20 years ago, I just was totally overexcited because in this beautiful place, under this beautiful church, was these line upon line upon line of brown tulips, loads of them, loads of different varieties, mahogany brown, golden brown, burnish brown, milky coffee brown, weak tea brown. I was just beside myself at this beauty, at this incredible beauty. Caramel brown, there was just everything. But of course, none of these are available. They are all historic varieties that are no longer reproduced quickly enough, make enough bulbils, grow vigorously enough, have good enough disease resistance. And they're all part of a family called the breeder tulips. And they were used in the early 20th century to breed other varieties, because then they were thought to be quite vigorous compared to the sort of tulip virus varieties that created tulipomania in Holland, etc. So this breeder group are grown as a historic collection, but not currently available. But then last year, I'm on our bulb tour as we go every April, and we drive through this tulip field, and there is a brown tulip. And it's called Dom Pedro. And it's the colour of mahogany with a bit of red wine sort of thrown in. And it's glossy and it's scented and it's really late flowering. And it's the most glamorous thing you've ever seen in your life. And it's even more glamorous, I find, if you do the florist thing. Willow Crosley, the wonderful florist, taught me about reflexing the petals of tulips, which is you've got your tulip in a kind of curving inwards shape, and you just gently force it to curve outwards, and that's called reflexing the petals. And you can bruise them a bit if you don't do it really gently, but what it does is it turns this inward facing to an outward facing saucer and makes you see the texture and the colour of the petal even more clearly. And I've just had such good fun last spring, this spring just been, with Dom Pedro, playing around with it and some of the burgundy, mahogany, other varieties, like, the Havran and Sarah Raven and all, the ones that are the rich palettes. Anyway, Dom Pedro is to die for, and I'm incredibly excited because we then managed to snap up lots and lots of bulbs, and they are in our range, and they are just beyond glamorous and exciting and beautiful. And the good thing is, of course, there are more once you start to think about it. So if you're thinking about milky coffee, the most fashionable desired tulip over the last 10 years has been La Belle Epoque, and it's crazily beautiful. And I remember my great bulb friends, Dickie Skipper and Queen von Boxtel, showing me it. And I was like, I'm not sure. It's a bit sort of muddy. It's a bit sort of, because I was into saturated or clean colours. And they were like, no, this is really beautiful. And they were completely right. It is very, very beautiful. And my eyes were open to it and have been ever since. But so there's La Belle Epoque. But we've now been working with breeders and spotting some others. And we've got 2 or 3 more sort of coming along in the pipeline. But another one that I'm just so excited about is rather like the breeder series. There's another series called the Copex series. And there's a fantastic breeder in the north of Holland who we go to every year. And I've known for quite some time because he bred Brun Wimpel all those years ago. And his son has taken over now and is doing equally wonderful breeding. And he's bred a beautiful variety called Copex Cairo, which is crossing the Copex series, which are very classy, with Cairo, which you'll know is that sort of ambery, it looks like a kind of glowing lantern somehow. So that's Copex Cairo is another one. And then if you want to go really kind of pastel milky coffee latte, there's another called Copex Apricot. But it's interesting, isn't it, that they're all becoming the most sort of des res, most desirable tulips. And I'm rather pleased because I've been obsessed with them for 30 years. And it's funny how brown tulips, no one was very interested. But now they are all the rage, and rightly so, I would say. So look out for anything brown or mixed with brown, I would say. Thanks so much for listening to Grow Cookie to Range, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven. Next week, Josie Lewis, our head gardener, is joining me, and we're going to chat about a big problem we've had this year with deer coming into the garden for the first time. So join us then.
You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.